Right, on to the last lap. We've got the section C. Once again, pause the video and take a moment just to read the scenario so that we can use this as our context for the answers. Number 10. The new payment system goes live. A week later, a cyber security attack takes place that causes disruption to the operation of the new system. Notice they've bolded the word operation to make that clear. We're not talking about there being an effect on the customers. We're talking about the effect on how the new system works. Explain 2 impacts this disruption could have on the customers who use the car parks. So 6 marks for this, 2 impacts, so 3 marks for each. We're doing explaining. Explaining means you're going to have to say why things happen and describe what has happened. So let's think how we can write about 2 disruptions that might well have happened to people who are using the car park. Well, the obvious one to start with when we think about it is that people might not actually be able to use the car park at all. So we'll start off by saying, right, 1 disruption. So remember, we're explaining. So because the system doesn't accept people's cards, there's 1 mark because you've given a reason. The barrier won't lift, so there's another mark. So you've said why something's happening, you've said what's happening, and now we're talking about what effect that will have. And the customers will not be able to use the car park. So there are 3 marks for an explain question. You've described what happens and how it's affected the customer and explained why it's occurred. 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks. Let's look at another thing that might happen. So we need to explain again. So we could say, for example, because the cards no longer work correctly, they might be matched to the wrong accounts. So we've given the reason. We've explained how they might be matched to the wrong customer accounts. And so the customer will be charged the wrong amount. Notice once again, we're talking, it says in the question, we need to talk about the operation of the system. So all of these questions we're looking at here and the answers we're given are about the operation of the system. Let's give you a third one as a bonus. So, because the customer will not be able to use the car park, they will have to park somewhere else and this could mean, let's have a look at any context we've got here. So, yeah, railway station car parks. So notice the context talks about railway station car parks, and this could mean that they miss their train. So again, we're looking at what's happened and we're explaining how that could lead to an operational implication for the customer, something that's going to affect their actual life because of what's going on in the car park. Because the customer will not be able to use the car park, 1 mark, they will have to park somewhere else, 2 marks, and this could mean they miss their train, 3 marks. 3 separate things that explain the effect on the customer. Notice that nowhere in here have I talked about them stealing money or stealing data. That's not to do with the operation of the car park. All it's asked you about here is the operation of the car park. Make sure you're clear about what you've been asked. Right, let's look at the next question, preferably the right way up. Right, so next question asked us, B1, security and legislative implications are considered during the project lifecycle. During which stage are these considered? Well, you could have written 2 answers at this point. So, security and legislative implications, you can think about the fact that you might be told about the need for legislative implications during the initiation phase. So that would be a correct answer. However, when you're thinking about how you would take that information on board, you would be doing that during the planning phase. So security and legislation are considered, first of all, you're being told about them in the initiation phase, and you're actually planning what to do about them in the planning phase. So either of those 2 are correct answers. Now, second part here, I can just about fit this on the bottom of the page. So this question asks us, there we go, let's make sure you can see it. Identify and describe one logical security method that could be used to keep the data held in the payment system secure. So identify, so as long as you name something, you'll get 1 mark, and describe. So then you have to go on and give information about that method. 3 marks for this. So we're going to need to get 1 mark for the identify, and we're going to say 2 things about the description. So let's have a look here. So logical security methods. Well, logical methods are methods where it's using the technology to actually do something. So the obvious one to write about would be a password. That's one logical method. You could talk about encryption. You could talk about firewalls. These are all logical methods. Let's put one more just up here. Antivirus. These are all logical methods of data security. That's your 1 mark for saying one of those things. Then we're going to get 2 more marks for describing them. So antivirus, you could talk about the fact that it checks everything that comes into the system to see if it's got a virus on it. And you could talk about the need to update it regularly to get your 2nd mark. Passwords, you need to talk about the fact that these would only be known to a few people. So that would make it harder for someone else to break in. Please don't say it's impossible. It's never impossible. No, known to a few people. And then you might want to talk about what makes a good password. So you might say a good password is hard to guess because it's long, or you use 3 random words, or it contains a variety of different characters. There's your 2nd and 3rd marks. Encryption, you can talk about the fact that it scrambles the data to make it unreadable so that only people who have the key can read it. What it does, how you can read it. 2 more marks. Firewalls. Remember, firewalls are a bit like a gatekeeper on your computer system, a bit like the doorman into the club, only allowing certain data into the system. So you can say it checks all data coming in against its rules, and it rejects any data that doesn't meet those rules. 1 mark, 2nd mark. 1 mark for saying it, 2 marks for describing it. And then on to question 11. At which point during the stage of the project lifecycle does an iterative review happen? Question 11. Now notice here that it says not which stage of the project lifecycle, but at which point during a stage. So it's not saying it's at a specific stage. So for this one, when do we do an iterative review? An iterative review is done at the end of each stage. If you were to write down the answer here at the end of the execution stage or at the end of the planning stage, you would get the mark. You cannot get a mark unless you indicate that the actual occurrence of the iterative review is at the end of a specific stage.